Good morning. It's 12 noon. We're back for the daily live broadcast. Thank you for joining. Appreciate people tuning in again on the regular day. Again, this is Blake Doyle here with the daily call-in program, the Island Do. And as I start off every presentation, I just want to talk about two quick things. First, and I'm going to disconnect my devices here. My apologies. There we go. And hopefully this is connected. I want to make sure the telephone is engaged, and I should have done that before I sat in. I'm always kind of racing a little bit to make these conversations. Just a reminder again, if you do want to call in about any items that you've heard all week or anything you hear today, the dial-in number is 902-500-2464. And there, we got the phone connected, so we're good to go. Just as a kind of a daily disclaimer, I want to reinforce the fact that what we're producing here is a podcast platform. It's an ecosystem. And we want other contributors to come in and be part of this. And we're starting to queue those up. We've got a number of people who will be offering their own independent podcast that'll be coming up when we relaunch under our version 2 redeployment. We've got technology, infrastructure, and space, and we're happy to have people come and contribute. We also have a number of good guests lined up, which we'll be reintroducing again next week, and I'll try to preemptively identify who is coming. I know Wednesday we have Jeff Cook back by popular demand, but we have some other people that want to come in, and I won't really reveal those until we get the confirmed timeline. And we have some exchange podcast contributors as well. I think next week, looking at my calendar, I believe Sean Casey, MP of Charlottetown, is coming in. He's been in the news lately. He's got a lot of perspectives on things as it relates to not only Charlottetown, but PEI in general. And there's a couple of new subjects, and one of which he raised in the context of the House recently, which is on this guaranteed income. It's come up several times. Dennis King was supportive of it. I'm concerned about affordability. But as we look at the impact of artificial intelligence and how everybody's going to be affected in the labor market, especially young people, it is more topical, and very curious to get Sean's comments, and we look forward to that conversation. So lots going on. We're back in the seat again for about 3 weeks. And once again, unfortunately, I'm traveling. Seems to be a recurring and increasing sort of opportunity or obligation of our day job firm, but we will maintain this continuity. Tomorrow we might have to do a pre-recorded session, and I do still have one, as I think I've got an obligation that's going to tie me up, but we'll discuss that tomorrow. So the disclaimer is this is for the exchange. It's a conversational podcast. This dial-in program under the Island Do is really, it's almost like an opinion op-ed piece. So we're getting connection from Islanders and communication. We don't really have anything to say that would be deemed as concerning, but it is just a general podcast communication platform. So it's a caveat, I guess, in how we're managing this. It's just public discourse. And as anybody who calls in, there's just gauge yourself accordingly. We don't want any concern or anything that's stated that might be negative to individuals. We try to be objective, but we do call out things that we think may be concerning to Islanders, specifically as it relates to politics. Today, we'll do the news review, get a bit of a stock market update. There's a couple of pieces that I want to follow up on. One was a news release that came out last week on the emergency preparedness announcement that Blois Thompson made with First Nations. And it's important First Nations are better mobilized and organized in the event of natural disaster, which seems to be an increasingly common occurrence. And there's great vulnerability to an island community like Prince Edward Island. But I found some interesting statistics as well from a recent study, and I'll go through those. And then the final thing I'll touch on briefly is there's a comment, and we do get communications in from listeners, and that is probably the most rewarding thing. Where we can, we like to do a little bit of background research. Again, it's what we can find in the public domain, and we'll report it to you in a kind of an unfiltered, unbiased presentation. You can form your own opinions based on that. But we did have an inquiry from somebody who's looking at information on the recently redacted Health PEI document. So we have done some additional research on that. We've got quite a voluminous amount of information. I'll disclose a little bit about that and what we found and how we found it. but I won't get into it in too much detail until I have a chance to absorb it. I don't want to release anything that shouldn't be released because the document was redacted, but we were able to locate this using our investigative sort of sleuth tools. I think we found some information that might be of interest to the person who proposed that and requested additional information. So if you have questions on anything that you hear, either during the broadcast, I know not everybody listens to this during the broadcast as we have it live, but if you do have any comments, we'd love to hear from you. And the phone lines are live and active now. The number is 902-500-2464. And the whole purpose is really to engage Islanders, let you have your say. So this is a platform for Islanders to communicate. And again, we know that people are listening outside of the people who connect during the broadcast, which is not always that large, but through our other mediums and other platforms, we do get a pretty good connection rate. So if you do have a question, you can always send it in. I'll ask Sylvia, who's probably listening, just to make sure that at the bottom of our screen that we do have the people who connect. There's some feedback that we do have the phone number 902-500-2464, but also that we have the email address. So you can either message us at the Island Do, or you can use the phone number and or the email address, which I think is islanddo@confederation.com. So a few methods to connect. Are we connected in broadcasting? We're all good? Okay, perfect. Looking for these comments. I think I have that live, but thank you so much for that double check. All good? Okay, I've been advised, and this is a funny thing. Thank you, Sylvia. I was told by a listener in Toronto this week that sometimes they're listening to the broadcast, and because I don't speak loud, and I have other guests on who do speak much louder, if that's okay, Sylvia, great. If it's not, please come back in. But my voice is a little bit low and it's raspy, so I don't project as well as I used to. Maybe I'm just old. But, if you're listening to this podcast and you have to turn the volume way up on your device and then something else comes on, it blows your speakers out. I want to avoid that. So I'm going to crank this up a little bit more just to make sure I'm projecting properly and you can hear me. And again, that's feedback that we had actually from a listener in Toronto. And we appreciate feedback from anybody, so thank you for that. Again, 902-500-2464. So let's have a quick look at the news. Just to start with that, it's our daily recap. And for those that don't have the opportunity to tune into the daily theater in the legislature, it's a good chance to summarize some of those activities. So May 7th was led by the continuing early learning childcare funding dispute. Senior care infrastructure, physician governance and trust, health system capacity, oyster sector fallout, and fiscal debt accountability. That is a really long term. There's some issues here that the government should be trying to get off the agenda, but they keep sticking. And the longer they stick, generally the worse it is for a governing party. The strongest local reporting signal from CBC was the childcare support staff story. The strongest legislator signal was a sustained question period over whether the early years education and whether the government's funding changes these cuts. So just for context, because I did watch the legislature yesterday, Liberal member Carolyn Simpson, who's been very passionate on this reduction in childcare funding, once again, in a very impassioned way, challenged the government. I think equally impassionate, Robin Kucher, who's the Minister of Education, took exception with some of the commentary. So there's a very vigorous back and forth on the Liberal government challenging the cuts. And I think Carolyn Simpson has built a little bit of capacity around this particular subject. She's certainly gotten the confidence and the appeal of people in the early childhood sector, and she seems very knowledgeable on that. Apparently she worked bureaucratically in that department, at least according to the statements that Robin Kucher had made. And Robin Kucher comes from a different perspective because he is in the education system. So there were challenges both to Premier Lance and to the Education Minister, Robin Kucher. It was a pretty dynamic discourse, not as fiery as we have seen with other conversations in the legislature, but this one was pretty passionate on all sides. So let's just have a quick scan of what's happening in the local media. So there was a story on through Education News Canada, reported parent concern about reduced government funding for supports in early childhood learning centres. CBC's Taylor O'Brien spoke with the father of a child in Summerside Center about the effects on children's education. So that was a story on CBC. Government announcements, so $3.9 million for cooling upgrades in private long-term community care homes. The province announced a 1-year cooling and capital improvement program to upgrade cooling systems in private long-term and community care homes, with cooling as a priority, but the funding also is available for critical infrastructure issues identified through building inspections. The program is funded through the Canada PEI Aging with Dignity funding agreement, which includes more than $29 million in federal funding over 5 years with long-term care and community care in the province. So big federal contribution, not unlike the recently canceled, not expiring contribution to Department of Health, about the same $30 million. Another item that was announced by government, it relates to the senior care capacity context. So PEI has 9 public and 11 private long-term care homes with 1,325 beds. I think we've probably worked with 85% of those beds, but there's plus 36 community care facilities. This makes the cooling announcement more than a comfort issue. It's also a resident safety, climate adaptation, inspection compliance, and workforce retention issue for those critical care homes across our province. The province recent news lists May 6th, and according to other media sources, the Hope Air, I think we discussed that yesterday, so we won't repeat that, in the legislature. And this probably comes back, I'm sure we'll have this conversation with Minister Kuchar and Carolyn Simpson, but ambulance staffing and response time data was tabled. So Health Minister Corey Deagle responded to earlier questions by saying the EMS averaged 14 staffed ambulances during the day shifts over the past year against a minimum standard of 11 and met the day shifts standard of 98% of the time. At night, he said the island EMS averaged 8 staffed ambulances against a minimum standard of 7 and met that standard 94% of the time. The minister also stated the most recent median response time was 13 minutes 11 seconds for emergencies and 18 minutes and 5 seconds for 9 emergencies. And that was one of the first statements that came up in the legislature yesterday. I think it might have been statements of ministers or responding to questions from the day before, which was a question of the opposition. I think Minister Deagle delivered that data effectively to reduce the impact or the threat or the challenge of those questions. So it seems EMS is certainly meeting their obligated requirements and exceeding them in the cases as presented by the minister yesterday. On the early learning and childcare, that dominated question period, and Education Minister Robin Kuchar said about 75 new positions will be required to meet anticipated demand from 400 additional early years enrollments in 2026, 2027. So it appears that at the younger ages, we've got population vitality, which is good for the moment. I still have reservation on the long-term population trends, and this would be an issue that the Department of Immigration under skills, workforce, and advanced learning have to address. I don't see much momentum there. I did make an inquiry today from that department to get a bit of a sense on what the strategic plan was of that department, because there certainly doesn't seem to be one. And I'm curious what that is. So back to Minister Kuchar, said that early years funding is increasing by $15.5 million to $101 million, while also acknowledging a 25% reduction in the pedagogical support, which is the issue that Carolyn Simpson has been very focused on. Then opposition pressed whether early years is education. Carolyn Simpson asked whether early learning and childcare is indeed education, arguing that if it is, the government is claimed that no education cuts is misleading. And this is where the sensitivity kind of got into the discourse on the debate. Kuchar answered yes, while later saying early years funding has increased by $15.5 million and that the budget process would allow members to question the numbers. So that'll be presented on the floor of the legislature, and I'm sure based on recent sessions, Carolyn Simpson's going to be pretty aggressive on questioning that. Again, if you've got a question, if there's something on your mind, by all means, give us a call. It doesn't have to be related to what we're discussing at the moment, but the number to call in is 902-500-2030. 2464. We want to hear from Islanders, and we want to hear your opinions on things. And if you've got a subject that you want us to discuss or debate, or just have your statement made publicly, this is the format to do it. And we encourage Islanders to do so. Same, you can send messages in. Friday is a kind of a quieter day, and maybe it's a day we want to drop from our routine. We'll evaluate all that when we look at data, and we'll be presenting polls to people who are engaged. So if you know somebody who should be subscribed to this Facebook account, please encourage them to do so. We'll put another appeal out here probably in the next week. And the same with all platforms, whether it's YouTube or Spotify. If you just click on that to subscribe, then we'll be able to engage with you directly and get your feedback so we can be more responsive to exactly what it is that you want to hear as Islanders from this new media format that we're developing. Another issue came up on fiscal governance. Committees and debt management was challenged. So opposition leader Hal Perry accused the premier of creating panels and committees instead of making decisions, including on defense opportunities, fiscal responsibility, red tape, and debt risk, all important things that have come up from government over the last little bit. Finance Minister Jill Burbridge said that the Fiscal Red Tape Committee has already met 3 times, and that the debt plan includes a 40% net debt to GDP fiscal anchor, which is about, I think it's below where we are. I should pull up my books, but I think we might be just under 40%. So it's kind of a provisioning for a further increase in debt, which would be kind of strange. The opposition didn't bring that up as I watched the legislature, but I think the 40% is greater than where we're at today. I think we're very high today in the high 30s. So that's an odd anchor, but an interest bite target below 7.5% and a general sinking fund. So my quick synopsis of that statement is not very fiscally conservative or fiscally responsible. Even 7.5% is a target. Like our interest rate now is probably 4% or just a little bit over 4%. 7.5 is higher. A 40% net debt to GDP ratio is higher, I believe, than we are today. So, if she's talking in terms of creating a general sinking fund or a sovereign fund, the concept is good, but the parameters need to be tightened if you're going to demonstrate any fiscal accountability. So I'll look at that in more detail. Maybe I'm wrong in my interpretation. If Jill Burbridge or your staff are listening to this today, contact me and let me know if I'm mistaken. But to me, just at first blush, I don't think that's a very significant fiscal accommodation for the debt challenge that we find ourselves in today. So let's look at environment approvals and document integrity were raised. So Hal Perry, opposition leader, questioned Land and Environment Minister Darlene Compton about safeguards for verifying signatures and information on environmental permits and applications. Compton said safeguards are in place, the department follows the regulations and legislation, and wrongdoing would be addressed if brought forward. So this issue has been pretty persistent in the House, really since Minister Gilles Arsenault rescinded his position as cabinet minister based on some items that had occurred with the direction of funds that were related to the Lands Protection Initiative. So we've discussed that in the past, but again, it's one of these issues that continues to stick with government, and the premier has already suggested it's going to be long sitting. The opposition have suggested it's going to be long sitting. I think it's going to wear on people. We'll see if it actually goes much longer than a traditional sitting of legislature, which wouldn't be much longer than now. But I think these things are going to continue to compound and follow the government. They may want to get out of the House as soon as they can based on how some of these things are resonating. Oyster sector fallout moved into workforce policy. So Robert Henderson, minister from up west, or not a minister, an MLA from up west, linked the oyster crisis to rural empowerment and questioned why Employment Development Agency special project funding was reduced by nearly $500,000. Then Workforce Minister Zach Bell said he would bring back precise details, referred to synergies with Skills PEI, and said there was contingency money available for specific asks related to the oyster sector. So the interesting thing for this department specifically, and Zach Bell, if you're listening, reach out to me because I do have questions on the immigration strategy and what the province's plans are, because it seems at best nebulous and at worst completely inactive. So I'd love to connect with you or somebody in your department. As it relates to this particular item that Robert Henderson raised, the funding for that department, at least for Skills PEI, is all devolved money from the federal government under two programs, the LDMA and the LMA, one of which might have expired now. But this is really, if you remember the term EDSC, or I think that's what it was called when it was a federal program here and a department in PEI, those funds have all been transferred to the PEI government to administer, and they have to do so within constraints, as every federal program has its own parameters that have to be adhered to. But the actual flexibility in the department is pretty limited. And when I look at a budget like $500,000, there's not a huge amount of latitude for those kinds of funds unless this is something that has been prearranged. So be curious to see where these funds are actually going to be pulled from. Again, let me throw out that number. It is 902-500-2464. And if you have anything on your mind, anything you hear, or anything you've heard in the community, please give us a call or pop a note in the comments on Facebook. Another item that came up is physician-government trust, and this became a major health political exchange, and probably an unnecessary exchange. Again, I question the strategy of the current government, but third-party leader Matt McFarlane cited Dr. Aleka LaFontaine, a former Canadian Medical Association president, saying physicians and PEI have lost trust in government. Premier Rob Lance said his government is rebuilding trust with island doctors in working with the Medical Society. Health Minister Deagle and the government has paused MOA activities to rebuild the relationship. The MOA, I believe, is that very controversial contract, which was retroactively negotiated after it was agreed to by the primary care physicians to include some additional demands, which wasn't received well by the primary care physician community. Now, one thing that Rob Lance did say, this I didn't record here, but when watching it, he identified that both he and all the members of his, caucus, I guess, are meeting with primary care physicians to get their feedback, understand their concerns, which is completely appropriate and not something that I'm traditionally been very aware of. I've never observed a lot of interaction or requests. Certainly I've never been requested for my perspectives on things. So I don't think there's been a lot of consultation in my observation. By way of reinforcement, I have observed members of the Legislative Assembly, in particular the Premier, meeting with family physicians in reasonably public environments for conversations, one-on-one conversations. So I do believe that's occurring, and I think it's the very least that can be going on to try to repair the damage that may have been done. As Matt McFarlane suggested, a breach of trust, and hopefully that is something that can be rectified, because we do need primary care physicians. Other alternative options are not necessarily suitable. I have found accommodation because I don't have a family care physician, and not everyone can do that, but there are options for people that are seeking alternate approaches to the absence of a viable family care physician network on PEI, which is a tragedy, but it's not going to be repaired anytime soon. So you have to seek alternatives as best you can to maintain your own care. Caregiver respite and home care. So Carla Bernard asked what supports are available for family caregivers who are allowing seniors to age at home. And Deagle acknowledged the importance of respite beds and said that the hospital capacity dropping to level 3, the hope is to reopen the full complement of respite beds. He was also open to gathering feedback from people with lived experiences in home care system. Good conversation, and maybe if we've got an overcapacity of medical facilities, maybe we need a unit dedicated just for this respite care, and it's not just for seniors, it's also for younger adults and younger pediatric patients potentially that do have a high demands on their caregivers, normally their parents, and respite is an important element in the continuity of reliable care for individuals that have high care needs. This is an interesting one, AI Scribe pilot in healthcare. So government members questioned Deagle on the AI Scribe pilot. Deagle said around 107 physicians, nurse practitioners, pediatricians and others are using the program. He described feedback as very positive and said patients can opt out, and said the pilot is expected to be surveyed after it ends in January of 2027. If I'm not mistaken, I think that question was raised by backbencher Tyler DeRoche from Summerside, who had suggested his personal experience with a physician who is using AI Scribe. As somebody who uses a lot of AI, I would say it's a great introduction. If you watch The Pit, is a program on HBO, many people have, and in real life scenarios, I'm sure it's the same with AI Scribe. Although it is a good addition to capture note information, AI is still hallucinating a little bit, which means it's not always capturing things accurately. So the information always should be double checked. And I guess the question is, there's a change in medical practice from previous generation of practitioners to the new generation who might be very adept at systems like AI Scribe and other technologies. But there's a loss of intimacy when you're relying on a third-party transcription service such as AI to capture the information on a patient's records. And there's a recall that's lost. That is, people learn different ways. There's auditory, there's writing. And if you're not writing it down and the activity is happening, if you don't learn auditorially, as many people don't, then you might lose some of those subtleties and importance in the capture of documentation. So interesting dimension of change and a transition between different demographies of the healthcare provider. And we'll see if that comes out in the report when the survey is completed in January 2027. Again, this is the Island Do Daily Call-In. It's Blake Doyle sitting here by himself. Next week, we're going to have some co-hosts again. I've been traveling, haven't arranged it. But the number, if you wish to call in, 902-500-2464. A couple more pieces here. I'll just rattle through very quickly. Pharmacy technician reclassification. Deagle said the health PI had prioritized the reclassification of pharmacy technicians to a new Group 8 level. This is a Treasury Board submission that has been made, and he hoped the matter could be resolved within 2 weeks. He also said the affected pharmacy technicians would receive back pay. The interesting channel to this story is kind of multifold as it relates to health PEI. In the absence of a reliable cohort of frontline family physician, primary care physicians, the province has adapted by empowering other professions to increase the scope of practice. And that's occurred in a whole bunch of different areas, from ambulatory care to pharmacists to other allied health professionals. This is all good, and people are compensated for their contribution. The challenge is when you start to look at primary care physicians and the types of services that they would normally provide and the remuneration that they would get. So there's a fee code for everything that any person in the medical system provides. So writing a script or a prescription is a certain fee code. Meeting a patient is a certain fee code. When you start to strip off all these, maybe easier aspects of the billing mechanism from the primary care physician, they're left with the more challenging diagnoses and interpretations. So a consult that they're only compensated for 15 minutes. Your levels are jumping up, so great to hear from you again. Always glad to get callers, and always appreciate your thoughts and contributions, Darwin. So what's on your mind today?
Well, it seems like I always have more questions than answers. So
I may not have the answers, but we'll pose it out to the people listening. So yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, up until 5 or 6 years ago, I was farming in a rural area on PEI, and then when I moved to Summerside, I've gotten to learn something about municipal politics and municipal budgets. And now I can't speak for other municipalities, but in Summerside, it seems like our debt is kind of under control. But there's like rules around the municipality where they have to, I guess there's certain covenants that a municipality has to keep. So they can't just go and just borrow and unlimited, if that makes any sense to you.
No, absolutely.
And but once I start looking at provincial budgets, it doesn't seem to be like that.
Yeah.
It seems like that there's almost like no end to the deficits, and then, you know, when people start squawking about this getting cut or that getting cut, it seems like the government can't win. There's a lot of people complaining about, you know, our deficit and how much debt we have, and I'm one of them. But then we all complain on the other side of the coin that this is getting cut and that's getting cut, and we can't have it both ways. Anyway, my question, I guess, that's
a lot. No, that's good. This is, you know what? I'm really grateful for your comments and calls, Derwin, because the whole purpose of this is to engage Islanders and empower them and let them have their say. And we may or may not have an answer in this call in, or may have a guest that has a better perspective. But I really do appreciate your tuning in regularly and your good questions and consistent sort of observations of what's happening locally. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I guess at some point, the province will be forced to cut spending on stuff, whether we all like it or not, right? Like, if we don't do it as a province, we're going to be made to do it in some way, shape, or form. Am I right? Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, and again, this is all opinion based. And you raised a couple things, Derwin. I might just start rattling them off if that's okay. I made notes. So just for some context, and hopefully my broadcast, my mic is working okay. But so under Wade McLaughlin, he introduced an act called the Municipal Governance Act, and I forget the exact date, but was in his term. And the whole purpose was to conform. It had a number of purposes. It took away the power of the elected members and gave more power to the operating officers, the CAOs, who were third-party kind of hired persons outside of the political process. The other thing it did, I believe, under the MGA was it made deficit financing not permissible. So if a municipality, Charlton or Summerside, had to perpetually be borrowing money or even under one budget, if they couldn't manage their expenses to their income, they could possibly lose their authority to remain as an independent municipality or city. In the case of Summerside, actually, Dan Kuchar, if you're listening, was going to come on and talk about the Summerside city budget. And I think we just had trouble aligning our schedule. So hopefully Dan or other members of the municipal council will get a chance to come on, because I think they did have a good budget. They always seem to manage their finances well. They have some really unique resources, especially the CUP is a great facility, but they also have the wind farm, which generates a lot of financial capacity. They generate their own electricity. They've got their own utility. And I think a big part of that income has gone to fund really unique investment projects, such as the credit union place. Now, the other thing on debt financing is the colleges and universities. So a lot of institutions that are funded by government, including Holland College as an example, also have to maintain a balanced budget, and they are forced to make operational cuts so that they can do so. So when you look at, you know, how the province funds their subordinates and to manage their subordinates, municipalities and others, they do enforce that fiscal management and accountability sort of mandate, and that's happened over many years through many governments. But I think you're right, and my concern with these kind of perpetual deficit financing is that whether it's planned and organized to restrict your spending and get closer to living within your means, or it's forced, one of those two things is going to happen. And every year I see these budgets produced. This year it's, you know, $410 million more than we bring in. Like, these compound now into $1 billion of debt that will have to be managed by somebody. And, you know, without betraying confidences, I, you know, ran into somebody who was, you know, selling our bonds up in, so the government of PEI has to sell a bond, which is really, you know, an amount of money that somebody's going to pay for at a defined interest rate. And investors really like these bonds because they're secure. Generally, you'd think a sovereign province or state or country is a safe place to loan money to. So investors like those, and they're guaranteed rate of return of whatever percentage. And there's an insatiable demand for these today. I don't think that's going to last as other vehicles become available that investors might feel more confident in the security of. And I reflected back to what happened in, I guess it was maybe the financial crisis '08, which is kind of a housing crisis. And they had these things called credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations. There are all these crazy instruments. They took all this debt, bundled it up. Nobody really knew what was in it. People still bought it, not knowing what it was until they didn't, and everything fell apart. So I guess back to your point on fiscal management, yeah, either planned or forced, our province is going to have to manage their expenditures. And I think in either event, it's going to be painful. And if you remember what John Jeffrey said on a previous Exchange podcast, he was really crystal clear on the issue is with the individual. We expect too much of government. We keep asking for more. And people like myself, I want cuts, but just don't cut anything that affects me. Cut something over here because I know we need to cut, but I don't want to be impacted. The problem is we'll all be impacted, and that'll come in the form of increased taxation or complete reduction of service and something that we feel we want. So good question. I don't know, a little bit of kind of color to some of your comments there, Daryl, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but it is it's a concern that's come up a number of times on this program with different contributors and hosts and podcast presenters because it's a real issue, and I feel it's not being addressed seriously. But to your original comment, yes, Summerside do manage their finances well, and in fact, they're obligated to.
And so, with that in mind, in the legislature, the government seems to, and this happens with all governments, and it's happened for as long as I can remember, they commit with a budget, and then the opposition will start griping about certain aspects that are getting cut in the budget. And I know that's their job,
right,
and all governments do it. If the Conservatives were in opposition right now, they'd be doing it. And but at what point, I guess, even in the last few days, they've backed off a couple of things that they were going to cut, and now they've backed off on it, and that's their job as a government, but to decide these things. But I would do in any cases. Does the opposition ever put out what I would call a shadow budget? I'd love to see what each party would do right now in this situation. We know what the Conservatives are going to do. They did the budget, but it would probably be a lot of work for an opposition party to do a shadow budget. Here's what we'd do instead. You know what I mean? Yeah.
In fact, I don't think it is a lot of work. They should have it done. So we had both Matt McFarlane and Robert Mitchell, the leaders of the other two major parties in the legislature, both on podcasts. If people haven't heard them, you can listen to them on any of the podcast platforms or theislanddo.com. I haven't seen a shadow budget from an opposition government or opposition sort of party in quite some time. But maybe if there's anybody listening from those parties they want to call in, my suggestion is exactly what you proposed, Darwin. If a government in waiting or an opposition party feels that they could do something better, they should present their policies and their budget. And, at least then people would say, okay, I understand what they're going to cut, where their priorities are. And maybe they're scared to do that because they don't have a solution. But I think a credible alternate government would present a shadow option. So you can evaluate it and say, okay, I like what they're saying, or I don't like this. In fact, if they're good policies, the current government will adopt them, as you commonly see that occur in any form of leadership convention or in, an election period. If they're good, they're usually acquired and adopted and presented by the governing party. But yeah, the shadow, if anyone's listening from the other parties, and in the interest of Islanders, at least Derwin's good suggestion, let's see how you'd present your options and how would you manage the budget? Because you're right, criticism for the sake of criticizing, you expect that. presenting solutions and alternate considerations, that's what's absent. And that would be great to see.
Yeah, right on. Well, that's all the time I'll use up on you today.
Oh.
Thanks so much for this.
Well, thank you for calling, Derwin, and I appreciate your consistent listenership to you and others that do participate. Thank you so much.
Right on. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you. That's a great comment. And to the people who do sort of tune in regularly, I'm grateful. I probably for sure wouldn't continue to do this, except we do get a lot of interesting feedback and comments by email and text and different formats. So it's more rewarding when I know somebody's listening and they've got something to say. So if anybody who's listening has a suggestion on any of Derwin's comments, because it had a few good observations there, the number is 902-500-2464, and we'd love to hear your perspective on any of these things, whether it's the management of finances at the municipal level or the debt management, shadow budgeting, how opposition parties could be presenting their approach to things. Call us, let us know. Send a note in the comment field. And if you're listening to this after the 1 hour broadcast, you can always send us a note or an email. If you're from an opposition party or from government and you want to have your say, give us a call. We'd love to add that discourse to this dialogue because it's important to get many people contributing to these conversations. Thanks again, Derwin, for that. Again, the number 902-500-2464. If there's anyone out there listening that has something else to add, let me just scan. We're kind of getting a little bit longer in the tooth here than expected. It's nice to have these hour-long conversations when there's a guest with me. They're long when you're just listening to me. So I'll just see if there's anything else kind of important from the legislative agenda yesterday. Just some bills that were presented and acted upon. I don't think there's anything too significant. Here's one on interesting public policy, and it's Derwin. It's in your backyard or close to it. It's West Prince break and enters arrests. So the PEI RCMP reported multiple arrests after connected break and enters in West Prince. And this involved a business in Norway, a seasonal residence in Kildare Capes, a construction trailer in central Kildare, and a stolen vehicle. Police said the stolen tools were recovered, and a search warrant and the tool markings, GPS tracking, were used to solve the case. So it's good to see that, if people are committing crimes, that there's a resolution to that. Some drug arrests in Summerside. I'll comment on a couple other quick things here. They do relate to Derwin's comment or call, so they're relevant enough to bring up. So the PEI GDP context remains positive but uneven. The province's GDP by industry page report suggests from 2025 that the GDP at $7.9 billion and chained in 2017 dollars. So they tie a lot of these financing to some specific periods so you can better measure them, both for inflation primarily, but you can, by chaining it to a certain point, it's easier to measure. So they chain this to 2017 dollars, and it's up 2.8% from 2024, making PEI the second fastest growing provincial economy in Canada in 2025, behind Newfoundland and Labrador. So that was an interesting little statistic. It's like the Scotiabank commercial, we're doing better than you think, you're richer than you think. Fiscal pressure remains central. So the TD Economics PEI budget note says the PEI's 2026-2027 deficit is forecast at $409.9 million, or 3.5% of GDP, and describes it as the largest in Canada. It also projected the net debt rising to 38.1% of GDP in 2026-2027 and approaching 40% thereafter. This frames the legislator May 7th exchanges on debt, fiscal anchors, and expenditure review and program reduction. So not a glowing review from TD Bank, and all the main 5 banks in Canada do have economics departments. They evaluate every budget, as do many major accounting firms. And these, I can pull them all together, but they kind of all say the same thing. Many of them are polite, especially the accounting firms, because they don't want to probably upset one of their biggest clients. But the banks tend to be a little bit more direct, and especially for a small province like PEI, they do address the concerns. oyster and fuel prices. So yeah, this is a good one. Iraq's petroleum order effective May 5th increased regular gasoline prices by 3.3 cents per liter. And this feeds directly into the cost of living, rural transportation, fisheries, trade, and small business operating costs. So at a time when, unmarked diesel, for instance, a little bit cheaper than diesel, not a lot. Island.
Hi there, yes.
Yeah, just identify yourself and tell us what you're calling about.
So this is Brenda. Hi there, yes. Let me just turn this down then.
Yeah, we get a little bit of feedback.
So this is Brenda. I've chatted in comments with you previously.
Yeah, thank you for all your comments, and thanks for the call today.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was just on, and I came back on, and I'm listening, and I thought I'd just speak on the topic of senior home care. So just for full disclosure, I'm also the person with a group of a whole other people, a bunch of people, including seniors, who are launching the Senior Home Independence Program. So sometimes I watch you from there now. And
I see that. I think the acronym is SHIP, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to share what's happened in the last 24 hours.
Okay.
Facebook page. We started following you. We really appreciate you taking the time to do all the research you did last week. It was really profound to have it all come out in one place like that.
That's good.
And we have a little bit to add to that on another occasion. Maybe we'll come on the show.
Should love to have you. Yeah.
What we want to say is Facebook page, we are getting ready to put some ads on the radio and newspapers. And we're going to have to cancel the ads because we have over 100 in less than 24 hours seniors living at home in PI that want our assistance, and we're starting a pilot project that we were funded for 4 individuals to work as PSWs in people's homes to help them to things they want to do, from hobbies to cleaning to cooking, you name it. We make your recipes, and it's just fabulous to see that seniors are stepping up as they are to say they want to stay home the resources and the ability to do so, right? So I think your platform's wonderful, and I just thought I should call in and say it's pretty incredible to see 100 inquiries in 24 hours, including phone calls and messages, and then on the page itself. So we'll be busy following up on all of those today, and I think that it's such a huge topic, but most of all, one of the most important things we can all be doing here right now in PI to serve the last of the islanders that know anything of the truest past, right? They're here right now. This is our last chance.
So this is, look, I normally, and I know you've sent some Facebook messages in publicly, and I've mentioned your name before. If people do send something in, unless it's publicly disclosed, I don't present the individual that sent the request in. And while I was traveling, you made a request on a little bit of data that we did try our best to present some information on. But tell me, let's use this platform as an opportunity to talk a little bit more about SHIP. So this is a for-profit new entity. And how did you, so within a short period of time, you had 100 people. So these are 100 islanders living at home that want supports from SHIP. Is that correct? And how did you get in such a short time, because I think you're a pretty new entity, how did you get so much engagement? And if you're funded publicly with that much interest in what you're doing, is there a possibility for either additional public or private funding to further enhance your business model?
Okay, so the business model is the social enterprise of a not-for-profit.
Perfect, okay.
So I personally was brought to PI 5 years ago because there was a family looking to help their family member who was in their mid-90s at the time, is now 101 years old, and she's going to be publishing a book. I'll just plug that.
Okay.
And
that's a good accomplishment.
So I came, and I'm like humble PI during the pandemic. Who wouldn't say yes to that, right? So I'm thinking I'm coming to a place that takes care of the people. I know all about it. And then I got here and found out that there aren't any services. There's not a single not-for-profit for seniors to help them to be empowered to live the way they want at home. But there's a whole lot of people doing it, amazing people on the ground. They're all in silos doing it on their own, and then the government has their programs and they're building on them. And we want to praise that. We have a lot of catching up to do. So the model is that we applied for federal funding through Canada Summer Jobs, and then there'll be a user fee. We will subsidize any party who isn't able to pay fully but will benefit. It's a pilot project, so we were looking at 12 seniors, 4 caregivers in Charlottetown, because through Sean Casey's office that it was actually approved, the Canada Summer Jobs. So it would be very local surrounding area. But now that we're seeing all of these people coming in, I mean, if I can just praise one person, I'm going to say Zach Bell came to my house and knocked on the door. He had heard something about SHIP. I had mentioned it at the levee to all of the ministers there, the health minister at the time. I told him you inspired me to write. I wrote a poem. He wanted to hear what it was. And I said, the thing is, I didn't like what you said, so what I wrote isn't so favorable, and I feel sad because he's gone now. But with that, I said you need to stop treating seniors as patients, and that's what SHIP's all about. Seniors are human beings that are living their life their way. They're at the helm of the ship, telling us what they need and want, and we're here as the anchor and the sales or the services to provide what it is they need and want. And so we will be hoping that at this point, we don't have time to be seeking out funding, but it could be self-funded through user fees, so we want to keep them low, right? Yep. There is a self-managed home care funding out there. I'm not sure exactly how it works based on income or not, but our argument is daycare is a social program, and senior home care should be a social program like daycare. We don't leave children 0 to 5 at home to tend to the means of their life, and the same for all those people who are the last who built this island. We should be making sure we support them in their home and to the means of their life and move them on. So, Brenda, you're a little bit muffled. I think you might have moved your mouth away from the phone. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. Oh, sorry. No, that's okay. And I want you to communicate how people can get in contact with SHIP. But first, I'll just say, Mark McLean, who was a classmate of mine, good personal friend, and a very competent minister and very accessible. He's a wonderful person and really a big loss to the government and to the department. A lot of time for Mark, who's a friend. And Zach, I haven't had a lot of interaction with many of the current government, at least not since they've been in government. I would know them all probably well enough to text them, but I do not text them. Zach, my interactions with Zach, and I played hockey with him and pickup years ago, very humble and compassionate individual. So, it's good to hear, and that would be consistent with my expectation of my interaction with Zach. He is, exactly the kind of person that should be serving the public because he's cares about the public. So I'm glad that he sought you out to support this. But tell us if you wanted to get more information. So I know you've got only 4 caregivers, but if there's more demand and people wanted to pay privately, is that an option? Can you get more caregivers? And how would people reach out to SHIP? Is it through the Facebook site, or what's the best medium to connect? Okay, so we have the SHIP page on Facebook and Instagram. We have shippi.ca, so put in the www.shippi.ca and it will bring you to our website. Our phone number is on there, but you can also send us an email at shippei.pilot@gmail. So I'll put it into the comments. Perfect. Here.
Yeah.
And we look forward. So it's senior built. There's a senior advisory board being established through a fellow not-for-profit organization. So it's separate from us. That we're collecting data. The participants have to be willing to take part in the study, to be videotaped, to be recording the impact it's having, or whatever it is. It's a lot of process, if you understand what I mean. Mm-hmm. And over the 8 weeks, we will collect this data so that we can give it back. We've met with the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors, the senior lead, and that was through Zach Bell arranged that, and we've met with Innovation PI, so we're going to be working on a grant.
Well, that's great news and great connections to people. And as I mentioned earlier, Sean Casey, I think, is on next week. So I think it's going to be a pre-recorded one based on schedule. But if he was ever on the call-in program, you could certainly call in. But I'll express your gratitude for his assistance with the Canada Skills grant. So,
yeah. We have a meeting with him next week, too, so
Okay.
we'll talk about this further. Well, thank you so much for taking my call.
Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate you calling in, and I'm glad things are progressing with that project. And if people want more information, they can certainly connect with you through Facebook or your website. So thank you for calling.
Thank you so much.
All right, Brenda.
So long.
Thank you. And just a reminder, Brenda did send a couple of notes in, another avid listener. And we did do some public research as requested by Brenda on senior living, and hopefully it was helpful, and helpful not just to Brenda, but for other listeners. We do get requests, and some of these things, I'll just quietly dig into some data and I'll present it. Many times people are sensitive to what they're asking, don't want to be acknowledged. We've had that a couple times today. So some of the stuff I'm presenting is at the request of listeners, which is wonderful because that's exactly what this format is intended to do. It's an engagement vehicle. Now, it's opinion-based. I do my best to present data objectively. Hopefully, I'm not doing anything that's controversial, but I'm presenting what I can find and sharing it because it is difficult sometimes for people to do the kind of research that we're able to do. So we're about an hour mark, and I think that's probably long enough for most people. There's one piece of research that I'm just going to touch on. A couple things here. Maybe we'll save some for next week. But just a high level, we did a report, I guess, while I was traveling on, I think it came up in the legislature someplace, on the redacted health PEI document. We did some searching while I was traveling, couldn't find anything. Now we've been able to employ AI to do a little bit of deeper research. So thank you to all those who've been involved. I probably just don't have enough time to get through it all. And I don't want to betray anything that may, in fact, be confidential. So I'll give a couple of just little snapshots on what I find. We can dig into this in more detail at another time. And I may not be correct, so I'm just going to present this loosely as what an initial cursory search provided. This was at the request of a listener, so I want to provide a little bit of context to it. So it relates to a review that was requested on health PI management, and this, I believe, happened late 2025, continued into 2026, and was released. I think I might be wrong because I've done a lot of project work with health PEI, but I think it was KPMG that actually provided the research. And there's certain departments that were affected a little bit more than others. But in a memo to staff dated 20th of May, 2025, Health PEI CEO announced a streamlined executive leadership team that would take effect on 16th of June, 2025. The memo explained that restructuring the executive team was necessary to restore public trust and strengthen the leadership structure. And all this, I'm not getting information from any place that's not publicly available. We're just using some pretty robust AI analysis and tools to find this data. The one thing I found, I had, and there may be listeners who are aware of this, but we had a kind of a cool, I come from a bit of an IT background, and I can get into that another time, but sold a company to a public company, have a bit of history with IT. But we were doing a lot of research on government data, which, in my opinion, shouldn't have been available. It wasn't. We hired some people, internal staff. There were actually, at that time, we had to go into the dark web, and the dark web's a dark place. But it is a place where you can kind of get access to information through backdoor channels. So we're able to get a lot of data that should have been available and wasn't. With AI, even you don't even need to use a dark web. You just need to know how to use the tools. And to those that have assisted with this, thank you. There is a little bit of a platform that we're developing that can support and enable other entities or companies that want to do some better reconnaissance, research, marketing, build tools that can support your business. A big part of what we're doing, and as I mentioned before, this whole podcast platform, the Island Do, and all the subordinate parts, really are AI focused. And it's as much an experiment for me as a proof of concept. I think the proof of concept is validated at this point, in my opinion, because we are reaching people. We are getting feedback. I think there's an interest from Islanders. And now the next step, I want to poll people to get a little bit more deeper data on what people are wanting. And then we're going to relaunch this in a little bit more vigor. So I'm encouraged by the direction we've been heading, just haphazardly, and some of the information we've extracted, again, by monitoring people's consumption. Again, if you're listening to any of these podcasts, please subscribe to the platform that you have most interest in. It just help us manage the algorithms and better understand what people are interested in. So let me just give you a couple more little bullets, and then we'll have to call it because we're about an hour. So excluded employee, there was in January 2026 an excluded employee compensation audit. The Auditor General found inconsistent compensation practices for managers and confidential employees. Payouts lacked documentation approval, and some employees were paid at a higher than earned rate, which is a concern. And I guess that's why the Auditor General flagged it. We'd love to have Auditor General Darren Noonan on. And you're always welcome, Mr. Noonan, if you hear this plea or somebody hears it, encourage him to come and join us. The Transformation Office Phase 2 report, which I think is the one that was most of interest. It details continuity of transformation initiatives, including work streams on patient access, surgical backlogs, diagnostic imaging, and operational excellence. It introduced new processes like discharge rounds and staffing models. And most of this is not too controversial, but it's a huge amount of data that we've got. And we need to kind of manhandle it a little bit and digest it before we just read things. But I think this is the one that the listener actually posed the interest in. It's a management review, and this is the redacted one. It was done by KPMG. In the context of it, Health BI's management structure with an emphasis on middle management roles. The goal was to identify unnecessary layers of bureaucracy and redirect resources to frontline care. According to the social media reports and commentary from MLAs, the review was expected to take about a year, and opposition ministers or members later criticized the government for withholding the resulting report. Journalists who filed a request under the Freedom of Information Protections Act reportedly received a completely redacted document, so that's it. And this has come up in the House, in fact, indirectly. I think Minister Corey Deagle suggested that there are some changes being made. We've talked on this program with other guests, and I've certainly mentioned it, with the bloat in government that's occurred through excessive hiring. In fact, 35% growth kind of over the last couple of years. And these are resources that are important, but resources that could also be used to empower the private sector to support the public sector, as opposed to stripping the private sector, which is certainly what's occurred. In my case, 3 or 4 people we've lost to government, as opposed to government engaging. So I think it's a very unique proposition of the current administration to compete with industry rather than to support it, to develop it, which is unusual and why we tend to travel a little bit more, but very strange approach to creating an economy. In the interest of time, I probably baited you for another connection next week, and I hope that people do call back in. Appreciate the calls today. They're very insightful and gave us some more stuff to think about internally. If you do want to learn anything more about SHIP, you can certainly connect to them through their various mediums, and sounds like a great effort. Social enterprise is something that's really interesting to me because it's an entrepreneurial initiative. It's creates a profit potentially, but it's really not intended to be profitable. The profit is fed back in to the institution, the organization, and social enterprise is a really important part of the economy that's not discussed very much. Maybe that's something we can overview a little bit more detail at a different time, because there's lots of opportunity for social connections, social enterprise. Do see a few texts coming in here, which is great. So people who know how to reach me, do send notes in. Thank you. To the listeners who are connecting every week, thank you. And for those that call in or send messages or text messages, continue to do so, because that's kind of what validates this proof of concept. And we're still struggling with it, but I think we're getting it ironed out a little bit better. I do feel every week gets better. Even when traveling, we're able to make sure there's continuity, which is important to me. And love to have, a large list of people that might come in for a week at a time to be co-host, because it creates more dynamic conversation. So look for that. We're going to start with some new co-hosts next week. And, we're certainly going to have Jeff Cook back, so tune in Wednesday. I think Jeff's committed to. I might be wrong, but we'll post that. If you want to hear from Jeff, as many people do, he's got lots of perspective, and he's not scared to share his suggestions. So, and to the other people I've spoken to, there's certainly a place here, and we encourage you to come in. I just have to build a little online booking app because I'm trying to manage logistics, and it's a lot, but we'll get more voices into this conversation. In an hour and 6 minutes, I better let people go enjoy their day. I do want to thank people for tuning in again. Hopefully the audio is better today. And thank you for your consistent interest in what we're doing. And we look forward to, reconnecting again on Monday. And we'll continue to do this as long as people kind of are interested in what we're trying to achieve here. So we'll have a little bit of out music. And I will go disconnect this live program. Thank you again. Enjoy your week. We'll catch your weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you.